I collapsed at graduation, my parents never came, and years later, when they begged for help, I finally said no. Listen closely, I want to tell you what happened, and if my story moves you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe so others can hear it too. My name is Zayla Monroe. I was always the kind of girl who pushed herself hard. School, part-time jobs, everything I could do to make a life for myself. But at home, things were different. My parents, Shad and Tanya Monroe, were distant and self-absorbed. They were the kind of people who only cared when it suited them, and I had learned early on not to expect much love or support from them. Graduation day should have been the happiest day of my life, the moment I had worked so hard for. I had stayed up for weeks, juggling late-night shifts and endless assignments, determined to graduate with honors. But the exhaustion caught up with me. Right after walking across the stage, my legs gave way, and I collapsed in front of everyone. I looked around, hoping to see my parents' faces, maybe a proud smile or a cheer. But there was nothing. No Shad, no Tanya. Not even a single word of encouragement. The emptiness hit me harder than I could have imagined. All those nights I had worked myself to the bone, all the times I silently hoped they'd care, they hadn't. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak, but more than anything, I felt alone. That day planted a seed inside me, a quiet determination that I would succeed on my own terms. I decided that I wouldn't let their absence define me or my future. I wouldn't wait for their approval, and I certainly wouldn't rely on them. Even as I sat there, surrounded by classmates and cheering families, I made a silent promise to myself. I would build a life where I could stand tall, proud, and independent, without needing them. That moment, though painful, became my turning point. It marked the start of a journey where I would take control, not just of my career or studies, but of my own self-worth. Looking back now, I see that collapse not as a moment of weakness, but as the start of my strength. I learned that sometimes, when people fail to show up, it's not the end, it's the beginning of your own story. And mine was just getting started. After graduation, I moved into my first tiny apartment, and for the first time, I was completely on my own. It wasn't glamorous, just a small, cramped space with peeling paint and a flickering light. But it was mine. I had to figure out everything by myself. Paying bills, grocery shopping, managing schoolwork, and holding down my part-time job. Every day was a struggle, and some nights I wondered if I had made a mistake trying to do everything alone. Even though it was hard, I refused to give up. I had always been a problem solver, and I quickly learned to budget, plan my schedule, and stretch every dollar I had. I stayed late at the library to finish assignments, skipped some social outings to save money, and even learned to cook simple meals to avoid spending too much on food. I hated feeling so tired all the time, but I also felt a quiet pride in knowing I was handling it all myself. Despite my determination, there were moments when the loneliness hit me like a wave. I would sit in my apartment after a long day, staring at the empty walls, wishing for someone to care, someone to notice my efforts. Part of me still longed for my parents' approval, even though I had learned to distrust it. The anger I felt toward Shad and Tanya simmered constantly. They had been absent when I needed them most, and now I was living the consequences of their selfishness. During these lonely nights, my best friend Leandra became my lifeline. She was always there to listen, to offer advice, and to remind me that I wasn't truly alone. We spent hours on the phone talking about school, work, and life, and she had a way of making me feel stronger when I felt like giving up. Leandra didn't judge me for struggling. She celebrated every small victory with me, from paying a bill on time to acing a tough exam. Her loyalty and support became my anchor in the storm. One day, while sorting through some old papers, I discovered something that made my blood boil. The money I had worked so hard to save for college, the money I had trusted my parents with, was gone. Shad and Tanya had spent it on themselves, buying things I didn't even want or need. I felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and betrayal all over again. That money was supposed to help me build my future, and they had stolen it for their selfish desires. But instead of breaking me, it strengthened my resolve. I realized that I couldn't count on anyone but myself. If I wanted a future, I had to fight for it with my own hands. Every struggle, every late night, every skipped meal became part of the foundation I was building for my life. I was angry, yes, but I was also determined. I knew that this independence, hard as it was shaping me into someone my parents could never understand. Someone strong, smart, and capable of surviving without them. The day I received my first scholarship, my phone started buzzing nonstop. I was thrilled at first, thinking it was just friends and teachers congratulating me. But then I saw the names, Shad and Tanya Monroe. My parents. My heart sank, a mix of hope and dread twisting inside me. They hadn't reached out for years, not when I struggled, not when I needed them. And now, suddenly, they were acting like they cared. Their messages were full of fake excitement. "We're so proud of you, Zayla. We missed seeing you achieve this," they wrote. I stared at the screen, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I wanted to believe them, to let myself feel that approval I'd been craving for so long. But deep down, I knew better. Their care was only coming now because it suited them, because my success made them look good. When they called, I could hear it in their voices, the practiced tone, the pity wrapped in pride. They talked about how sorry they were for missing so many milestones, how they always wanted the best for me. But the memories hit me like a punch. The empty stands at my school plays, the nights I cried after a tough exam, the graduation where they didn't show up. All those years of neglect couldn't be erased by a few words of guilt-laden pride. Part of me wanted to reach for their love, to let them back in, even just a little. My heart ached for approval, for acknowledgement from the people who should have been there from the start. But the other part of me burned with anger. I remembered every missed opportunity, every moment I had to fight alone. I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why my parents didn't care. Their sudden interest now felt like an insult, a reminder of all the pain they had caused. I realized then that this was different from anything before. This wasn't just neglect, it was manipulation. They wanted me to feel guilty, to give them the power to make up for their mistakes without ever really paying for the years they had ignored me. I would not give them that satisfaction. I ended the call feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Anger, yes. Hurt, definitely. But beneath it all, a seed of something else had been planted, revenge, quiet and steady. I decided I wouldn't forgive easily. I wouldn't let them waltz back into my life just because I had achieved something they never supported me through. I would prove my worth on my own terms, and if they wanted to be part of my world, they would have to earn it honestly, not through manipulation or guilt. That night, I made a silent vow. One day, they would understand what their absence had cost them, and it wouldn't be through words or tears. It would be through the life I built for myself, strong and unshakable, entirely without them. Graduating college with honors felt surreal. I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, and for the first time, I truly felt like all those sleepless nights, skipped meals, and endless hours of work had paid off. Unlike my high school graduation, there were no empty seats of parents who didn't care. This time, I had earned my success entirely on my own, and it felt powerful. Soon after, I landed a job at a boutique investment firm in Atlanta. It was everything I had worked for, challenging, fast-paced, and full of opportunities to prove myself. I dove into my work with determination, quickly earning respect for my intelligence and problem-solving skills. My days were long and sometimes exhausting, but I thrived on the independence, the sense that every accomplishment was mine alone. I didn't have anyone holding me back or doubting my abilities this time. As I settled into my new life, I couldn't help but flash back to that graduation years ago. The memory was sharp, the heavy disappointment, the empty rows of seats where my parents should have been, and the hollow ache of wanting them to show up just once. I remembered collapsing from exhaustion and the silence that followed. That image fueled me, reminding me of how far I had come. The contrast was staggering. Then I had nothing but myself and my determination. Now I had a life I could be proud of, full of achievement and respect. Living independently in Atlanta, I began to understand the real meaning of self-reliance. Paying my own bills, managing my apartment, and navigating my career taught me discipline and grit. I learned that success tasted sweeter when it was earned through sheer effort and intelligence, rather than handed to me by people who were supposed to care but never did. Every milestone I reached was a quiet victory against the neglect I had endured, a way to prove silently to my parents that I didn't need them to succeed. Part of me felt a subtle satisfaction in knowing that my rise was, in a way, a quiet form of revenge. I wasn't seeking to hurt them or to humiliate them publicly. I was focused on living a life they had refused to support, showing that their neglect would never define me. My success was my message. I had survived, grown, and thrived without their help. Even as I celebrated promotions and recognition at work, I carried that drive with me. Every project I completed, every challenge I overcame, strengthened my independence and confidence. I had turned the pain of my past into motivation, using it to push myself further. With every success, I I reclaimed a little more of the dignity that had been denied to me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Free from the shadow of my parents' neglect, free from the need for their approval, and free to define my own path. My life had become a testament to resilience, intelligence, and determination, and it was just the beginning of proving to the world, and to myself, that I was unstoppable. I hadn't heard from my parents in months when the first call came. Shad's voice was shaky, something I had never heard before. He told me he had lost his job, and that things were worse than he had expected. A week later, Tanya called, sounding weak and tired. She explained that she had fallen ill and needed help covering medical bills. Both of them spoke as if they were entitled to my assistance, as if I owed them for simply existing. I listened quietly, my hands gripping the edge of my desk. Part of me wanted to rush to help, to put their suffering aside and be the daughter they should have wanted all along. But another part of me recoiled. The memories came flooding back, graduation day, collapsing from exhaustion, and the hollow seats where they should have been. I remembered every birthday they ignored, every parent-teacher conference I had to face alone, every time I felt invisible to the people who were supposed to care most. The tension inside me was unbearable. Could I really consider helping them after all they had done, or not done, over the years? Could I truly give them money or support when they had never supported me, when their care had only ever come wrapped in manipulation or guilt? I paused, thinking about the sleepless nights and sacrifices that had built my life, the life they had taken for granted and ignored. When Shad and Tanya sent emails with lists of bills and hospital costs, I read each one carefully. I imagined myself sending them help, feeling obligated, and then I remembered how easily they had taken from me in the past. The money I saved for college that they spent on themselves. Every fiber of my being resisted giving them anything, even as a small voice inside whispered that maybe this was my chance to forgive, to finally be the good daughter. Instead, I remained silent for hours. I asked questions, listened to their explanations, and even made small suggestions for managing their situation. But I refused to commit to anything. I could hear their frustration through the phone, the subtle guilt trips and thinly veiled threats about what they had done for me, or how I was family. The anger inside me flared. This was exactly the pattern I had experienced for years: requests, manipulation, and the expectation that I would fix what they had neglected or destroyed. By the end of the week, I had decided nothing would happen without careful thought. I wouldn't give in to pity or their sudden concern. This was a turning point for me. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, boundaries, and finally standing up for myself. I realized that if I allowed them to pull me back into their world, I would be repeating the past, letting their neglect and selfishness control me once again. For the first time, I felt the weight of real choice in this relationship. I could help, or I could withhold, and the decision rested entirely with me. I didn't know yet how far I would go, but I knew one thing clearly. Their suffering wouldn't dictate my actions, and this time, I would act on my terms. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I held the power they had never earned. The messages started coming nonstop: letters, texts, even calls at odd hours. Each one was carefully crafted, full of apologies and pleas that made them seem vulnerable. Shad wrote about how sorry he was for losing his job and how he had learned his lesson. Tanya sent tearful voicemails about her illness, her voice quivering as if she were helpless. They painted themselves as victims, as people who had finally realized the error of their ways. I read each one, my chest tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. Their timing was too convenient, their words too polished. I knew their act. I knew that after years of neglect, they were trying to pull me back in, to make me feel responsible for their well-being. And for a moment, a small flicker of doubt crept in. I wondered if maybe they really had changed. But when I finally agreed to meet them in person, all illusions shattered. Sitting across from Shad and Tanya at a small cafe, I could see the lines of calculation beneath their apologetic smiles. Their eyes flickered toward me, looking for any sign of weakness, any crack in my armor. I didn't give them one. As they spoke, recounting their hardships and begging for my understanding, memories of my past blazed in my mind. I remembered graduation day, collapsing from exhaustion, and the empty seats where they should have been. I recalled every ignored birthday, every time I had called for guidance and found silence instead. Their faces in that cafe couldn't erase the years of absence. The bitterness I had buried for so long surfaced with full force. Instead of shrinking back or letting them dominate the conversation, I chose to subtly assert my power. I listened carefully, letting them speak, then asked questions that revealed the holes in their stories. So, you spent the money I saved for college on a vacation? And that wasn't selfish. I asked, my voice calm but cutting. Each lie they told unraveled under my scrutiny. I didn't raise my voice, didn't lose control. Every word I spoke was measured, deliberate. I realized then that this confrontation wasn't just about hearing their apologies. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I could let them manipulate me, or I could expose their selfishness while maintaining control. Every answer they gave, every excuse they offered, reinforced the truth I already knew. They had never prioritized me, and they still hadn't. By the end of the meeting, I had made my decision. I would not let them back into my life on their terms. I wouldn't hand over money or forgiveness. Instead, I would rise above, using my intelligence, independence, and success as my response. My revenge would not be loud or public. It would be subtle, calculated, and deeply satisfying. I would let my life, built on my own effort and resilience, speak for me. And as I left that cafe, I felt a quiet thrill knowing that I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming power that had been denied to me for years. By now, I had a clear picture of exactly what I needed to do. Years of studying finance and working in the investment world had given me skills my parents never thought I'd need, but skills that were perfect for this moment. I had built a life of independence, and now it was time to use that knowledge to assert control over the very family they had expected me to support blindly. The first step was setting boundaries. I made it clear to Shad and Tanya that there would be no free help, no emotional manipulation, and no attempts to guilt me into acting against my own interests. When Shad called, trying to twist my heart with stories of his unemployment, I stayed firm. I will not fund your mistakes, I said calmly, leaving no room for argument. Tanya tried the same, painting herself as frail and helpless, but I listened without wavering. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless child who would give in. I was in control, and I made sure they understood it. Their reactions were immediate and revealing. They were desperate, their voices rising in disbelief. We raised you. Don't you owe us anything? Shad demanded over the phone. After all we've done for you, Tanya added, her tone dripping with fake sorrow. I felt a flicker of satisfaction as I realized how powerless they were now. They had tried to control me with guilt and manipulation for years, and finally, the roles had reversed. I started documenting every interaction. Every call, every email, every attempt at manipulation went into a folder I kept meticulously. I knew the value of keeping evidence, not for legal reasons but for personal power. Each record reminded me that I was no longer their victim, that I held the upper hand. I could see their frustration mounting, and I felt the thrill of control for the first time in years. As I strategized, I began to outline ways to reclaim more than just my personal boundaries. I reviewed family assets they had once assumed I would cover or manage, investments, bills, debts, and I looked for opportunities where their reliance on me had been a weakness I could now turn into strength. I didn't want revenge for the sake of cruelty. I wanted justice, measured and precise. Every move I made was deliberate. I was careful to remain professional, composed, and unshakable. I let them see that I had power they had underestimated, that their attempts at guilt were futile. And yet, I could feel the suspense building inside me, the quiet anticipation of how far I could push this, how completely I could reclaim control of my life and the respect I had been denied. In my mind, I saw the path ahead clearly. No free handouts, no manipulation accepted, and every interaction documented. I had taken the first decisive steps in turning my anger and hurt into a calculated plan. The thrill of this realization was intoxicating. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving my past. I was actively shaping a future where I decided the rules, and my parents, for all their attempts, had no power over me. It didn't take long for the consequences of years of neglect to catch up with Shad and Tanya. Their financial situation worsened after Shad's extended unemployment, and Tanya's health continued to decline. Creditors started calling, bills piled up, and suddenly the life they had taken for granted began to crumble around them. Friends who once admired their carefree lifestyle now looked at them with judgment, whispering about how they had ignored their own daughter's struggles. Word spread in the neighborhood about their predicament. People who had once invited them to gatherings or praised their apparent success now avoided them or offered sympathetic but pointed comments. The community, once blind to their selfishness, now saw the truth. Shad and Tanya had prioritized their comfort over their child's future. Every conversation, every glance from friends, reminded them of the choices they had made and the price they were paying. Despite the chaos, I continued to build my life steadily. My career was flourishing, and my independence remained unshaken. I bought a new apartment, advanced at work, and even took time to enjoy moments I had long denied myself. Each success I achieved was a quiet contrast to the downfall my parents were facing. I didn't flaunt it or gloat. I simply lived fully, demonstrating the power of resilience and self-reliance. My life had become a testament to what could be accomplished when someone is determined, disciplined, and free from manipulation. Shad and Tanya eventually reached out again, their voices tinged with desperation and regret. They admitted their mistakes, spoke of their failures, and pleaded for reconciliation. But I had learned the value of boundaries and self-respect. I listened quietly, without letting emotion dictate my actions. I acknowledged their words, but made it clear that I would not allow myself to be pulled back into a dynamic that had caused me so much pain. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would not mean surrendering my power or sacrificing the independence I had fought so hard to achieve. There was a strange satisfaction in watching them confront the reality of their choices. They had finally understood the depth of their neglect, the long-term consequences of putting themselves first while ignoring their daughter. Yet their understanding came too late, and it was mine to witness, not mine to erase. I could see the shame in their eyes when neighbors subtly referenced my achievements or asked how I was doing. For the first time, they experienced the emptiness of neglect from the other side, and there was nothing they could do to change it. As I continued to thrive, the contrast between us became undeniable. I was strong, capable, and respected. They were struggling, isolated, and faced with the reality of the harm they had caused. There was no dramatic revenge, no cruel spectacle. Only the quiet, undeniable truth that I had built a life on my own terms while they were left to reckon with theirs. Justice had been served in the most satisfying way, through my success, dignity, and unwavering independence. I decided to visit Shad and Tanya one last time, not out of obligation, but to close the chapter on a relationship that had caused me so much pain. I arrived calm and composed, dressed in a way that reflected the confidence and independence I had earned over the years. I walked through the door of their modest home, not as the desperate child I once was, but as a woman who had built her life entirely on her own terms. They greeted me with tentative smiles, as if my presence might erase the past or offer them a chance to reclaim some lost control. I let them talk first, listening carefully to the familiar mixture of apologies and excuses. I could see they had rehearsed their words, hoping to tug at the daughter they had once ignored. But I didn't flinch. I had nothing to give them. Not my money, not my forgiveness, and certainly not my submission. I began to speak, my voice steady and measured. "I came here to tell you the truth," I said. "Your neglect shaped who I am, yes. But it will never define me. I am not the girl who waited for you to show up, nor the woman who relied on your approval. I am the person I fought to become on my own." I could see the weight of my words hit them. Their expressions flickered between guilt and disbelief, a mixture of emotions I had come to expect from years of manipulation attempts. I made it clear that I would not accept their attempts at reconciliation or any financial handouts. "I don't need your help," I told them. "I don't need your approval. I've built a life that is mine entirely. I am proud of what I've achieved, and I won't allow the past to pull me back into old patterns." There was no anger in my voice, only the quiet, undeniable strength of someone who had claimed her own power. Shad and Tanya exchanged glances, their words failing them for once. They tried to speak, to offer more apologies or explanations, but I held up a hand. "There's nothing more to say," I continued. "I am closing this chapter, and I need you to understand that this is final." The room felt heavy with silence, and I felt a subtle satisfaction knowing that I had drawn a clear line. I left their home without a backward glance, my steps confident, my heart light. They were left inside, reflecting on the years of absence and the opportunities they had wasted, powerless to undo the life I had created. My revenge had not been cruel or spiteful. It had been deliberate and grounded in self-respect. I had achieved justice through my own success, through the boundaries I had set, and through the life I had fought to build. As I walked back to my apartment, I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. The past was behind me, and the future was entirely mine. I had faced them, spoken the truth, and reclaimed my dignity. And that, I realized, was the most powerful form of revenge of all, one that left them with nothing but reflection, while I moved forward stronger, independent, and unstoppable. Sitting in my apartment one evening, I let myself reflect on everything that had happened. The years of struggle, the exhaustion, the heartbreak, and the countless moments I had felt invisible. All of it came rushing back. I thought about the little girl I had been, hoping for love and support from parents who never showed up. I remembered the anger, the tears, and the nights I lay awake wondering if anyone would ever see my worth. And then I thought about how far I had come. Every challenge I had faced alone had shaped me into the woman I was now, strong, independent, and unafraid. The betrayals I had endured no longer defined me. Instead, they had fueled me. I had turned every moment of neglect into motivation, every disappointment into determination, and every wound into wisdom. I realized that my growth and resilience were proof that I didn't need anyone to validate me. I had built my life entirely on my own terms. I thought about my parents one last time. They had tried to manipulate me, to pull me back into the cycle of guilt and dependence. They had expected me to forgive easily, to offer support when they had shown none for years. But I had learned the power of saying no, of setting boundaries, and of protecting my dignity. I had achieved a quiet revenge, not through cruelty or malice, but through success, composure, and self-respect. Watching them face the consequences of their choices while I thrived had been satisfying in a way no dramatic confrontation could ever match. I also reflected on the lessons I had learned about resilience. Life had not been fair, and betrayal had been a constant companion, but I had learned to navigate it with intelligence and strength. I had discovered that independence wasn't just about financial security. It was about owning my emotions, my decisions, and my boundaries. I had learned that the most powerful victories are often quiet, earned through persistence and self-respect rather than noise or spectacle. Looking at my life now, I felt a profound sense of pride. I was free from my parents' influence, free from the guilt they had tried to instill, and free to live a life defined by my values and ambitions. I had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into determination, and neglect into a drive that propelled me forward. I realized that this freedom, this sense of control over my own story, was worth more than any approval they could have offered. To anyone listening to my story, I want you to understand this. Saying no can be the most powerful choice you make. Standing up for yourself, setting boundaries, and refusing to let others control your life doesn't make you unkind. It makes you strong. Life will test you, people will let you down, and betrayal may leave scars, but your resilience and self-respect are yours alone. And sometimes the greatest victory comes not from confrontation, but from living well, thriving on your own, and proving that your past does not determine your future. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the journey settle. I had survived, I had grown, and I had triumphed. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free. Do you think Zayla made the right choice by standing her ground and refusing her parents? Or should she have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if you like stories about resilience, independence, and standing up for yourself, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this.